Warning, this episode contains graphic language and depictions of disgruntled housewives, mouthy old men, creepy little girls, and as always, teen angst. Also, there'll be spoilers for chapters 50 through 56 of Eldest, Book 2 of the Inherent Cycle by Christopher Paolini. Listen at your own risk.
Is this a podcast, or is this just fantasy? We're just two nerds and we love our fantasy. So join us if you want to nerd out. Time to start the podcast and see. Anyway, here's the show.
Hello, readers. I'm Dane Patterson, the host who just wants a friend who gets me like Bridget gets Roaring, but with less murder at the end.
And I'm Jacqui Lanier, and is this a podcast or is this just fantasy? The podcast where one host totally gets the other one, but is going to have to rethink her murder plot end game, unfortunately.
Oh, no. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, there's a link in the show notes. And if you can or just don't want to, we totally understand it. Just ask that you please rate us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yes, and as always, visit us at isthisjustfantasypod.com, a website where you can buy the cool hats, hoodies, stickers, and shirts that we sell, both specific to Aragon and celebrating the whole genre of fantasy symbolism, a thing that our merch is filled with. And we never fail to post goofy shit on social media, so you can find us at Just Fantasy Pod on Instagram or Twitter, and at Is This Just Fantasy Pod on TikTok, fellow kids.
We're hip, we're cool.
We are hip and we are cool. Our last section, I do want to do a quick recap of before we jump in for this episode's set of chapters. So last time we started with Aragon's time moving more quickly in Elismira with some sweet training montages to accompany it. We love a training montage.
Love it.
Aragon is in love with both Elismira and Arya, but she's now determined to avoid him at almost all costs. So
I wonder how that happened.
that's fun for young love. So his logical solution is to break into her room and leave her a bouquet of flowers.
As you do.
Of course she returns while Stalker Bean Farmer is just lurking about, and Arya tells him that she accepts his honest apology and that they can be friends, but she is going to be leaving after the Blood Oath celebration to go back to the Varden.
I'm sure he stopped and never, ever again tried to hit on her.
That is not what happens. Spoiler alert.
No means no, gentlemen.
Yes, Aragon needs to learn that lesson badly. Obviously, he hates that she's going to be leaving, but on the bright side, his training, meanwhile, is cool as hell.
Yeah.
So that's good.
It's pretty dope.
Aragon practices mounted combat with Saphira, and Glader explains the origins of the bond between elves and dragons, which is cool. Aragon learns about Shuriken and Galbatorix, why their bond is so perverse and horrible. He also realizes that veganism is, in fact, contagious. Something we've all been wondering.
Watch out, everybody. Stay focused.
Yes. But Saphira is happy enough to eat meat for two, so we're going to be all right in the meat eating department, I think.
Thank you, Saphira.
So one morning during lessons, Aragon feels a sharp pain in his leg and realizes that his dragon radio's broken. And when Glader turns up with a wound, Oramus tells Aragon that Saphira is also hurt. So Aragon rides off on his noble steed to reach his dragon at the Stone of Broken Eggs. There he finds Saphira in a dragon nest that's been abandoned since the war between dragons and elves. She tells Aragon that she thought Glader would be her mate, but the gold dragon does not want her, and she attacked him when he told her this.
Feisty lady.
Super feisty. Aragon does not discourage that behavior at all, and instead heals her leg using a complex spell and reassures her that she's his family, and she might have a shot at mating with one of the two remaining dragon eggs that Gal's holding on to. So he's like, perfectly acceptable, maybe apologize for it, but other than that,
that's fine.
No notes.
Aragon's great with relationships, though.
Back in Elismira, Aragon and Arya continue their reconciliation. They're actually spending some friendly time together after his breaking and entering. And Aragon starts to enjoy the culture of the Elven city. He continues his training, but it continues taking a higher and higher toll on him with his back. Oramus tells Aragon and Saphira to prepare gifts for the Agaiti Blotner, and they are way out of practice for the theater. It's kind of a problem. But
I love that he waited till a week before. I'm never going to forget
hilarious. But Eragon writes a poem about his battle with Durza, and Saphira fire and tongue carves a sculpture that dances when she blows flame in it. They're both big hits as far as gifts at the Blood Oath celebration. And as the celebration culminates, there's a big ritual at the Manoa tree during which a dragon tattoo rips off the body of two elven twins and flies towards Eragon, causing him to fall unconscious in intense pain. Very, very dramatic. And in the last episode's last chapter, Eragon wakes up, so he has not died, thank God. He wakes up in his rooms after about an hour with the Blood Oath celebration still raging around him, and he discovers that the dragon's wild magic and the elven ritual have healed his bodily wounds, all of them, and given him all of his elven traits that he was going to acquire at some point during his rider bond. And he looks like so dreamy.
He's like pretty, but like rugged.
Exactly. So he rejoins the party and decides his first order of business, now that he's been truly reborn, is to follow Arya through the woods and attempt to woo her once again. He's like, if I can't do it now, I'm never going to be able to do it.
Oh, no.
She does friend zone him and tells him to find someone his own age, correct Arya.
Yes.
And Eragon breaks down at the very end of the section and is consoled by Saphira. Who else? What will heartbroken bean farmers do next, Dane? Where are we going to?
Well, we'll have to put a pin in what they'll do because Eragon's not in this episode.
That's right. I was kind of glad to take a hard pivot away, I think, from his chapters. His last plot line was, I mean, obviously Savior Rebirth, very fun,
Yeah,
very
we loved
cool,
it. Yeah.
But
we don't love the crying and well, it's not that the crying necessarily.
the
that bothers us.
constantly harassing a woman who has rebuffed your advances over and over and been like generally kind to you about it. Like he's straight
about
up
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't like Arya, but she has been very clear and straightforward. If she's not into it, dude, stop.
And she's like forgiving enough to be like, we could still be friends, I guess,
Yeah,
but
we could
like
be
you
bros.
have to stop.
She's like, we'll talk about like nature and and veganism, but like we can't and perfect elven horses. But I don't want to make out.
Yes, but we'll have to revisit that at a later date. It's
I'm
time
sure
for
it won't come
Roran
up
and
again.
Naswada, Dane.
Okay, here we go. That takes us to chapter 50, Landfall. Last episode, as we just mentioned, was all Eragon. And this time it's all Roran and Nasawada.
Yes, Queen President.
Yes, it's awesome. We cut back to Roran on Clovis's barge, and I like to imagine there's a shot back to Roran, shirtless, pulling an oar while he stares into the horizon.
Fade in.
Sweat.
Exterior. Roran alone.
Yes, sweat sliding down his brow, while his piercing eyes, the color of a rutabaga, glint in the sun. Got to keep it hot for Paolini.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I wish that you wouldn't, maybe.
That's what I imagine in my mind. Anyway, this chapter is actually pretty short and pretty easy to sum up. Roran makes Clovis stop the barges outside of Tyr. Doesn't want to get caught, with his illegal moving the city of Carvajal.
Yeah, that'd be a problem.
Yeah.
All the trafficking and the military dictatorship that those people live under.
And trying to escape the law.
Yes.
Yeah, he's kind of weird. Clovis, understandably, is pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as the newly bearded Roran, to show us that time has changed, walks among the Carvajal villagers, fully the reader Stronghammer now. He walks around and he reflects on the ways in which he's changed, in which they've changed. It was a hard journey and the villagers are looking worn and tired. And this, every time we come into the villagers, they look more worn.
Yes.
And more
to
tired.
show that time has passed and not in a way that's kind.
Yes. They're all looking a bit garrowy to
Yes,
Roran,
yes.
which actually puts him at ease. Roran is trying to remind me of a president. He talks to the person that put them and like puts someone at ease. He puts his hand on another person's shoulder. This person asks him to dinner while another asks him to help with their teenage son, and so on. It's clear he's the big man in charge, and I bet he even kisses babies at his free time. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, 100%. I mean, hopefully he doesn't bless him like his cousin.
That
doesn't go
That doesn't bode well. Yeah, Stronghammer 2024 for the people by the hammer.
Oh my God.
That would be that's what I'm
Who's
thinking.
his running mate?
Oh gosh, Dick Cheney. Okay, I'm just kidding. I don't know, but he'd probably use his family. He'd probably be like a writer ticket. He'd be like Aragon.
No, he's mad at Eragon.
Oh, God, so you're so right. Horst. Horst
Yeah,
would be his
for
like
sure.
sweet
well,
person,
no,
people
I
person.
think Baldor.
Baldur.
I don't think he'd want to look dwarfed by Horst's experience.
That's true. It would be a young ticket. Their thing would be young but experienced.
Yes.
I don't know. Well, anyway, Roran decides that they can't let Clovis leave with his barges before they secure the village passage to Tyr. So not only does he bully Clovis to stay behind and not go to Tyr, Clovis has to wait while Roran leaves most of the village behind. And I have poor Clovis here.
No.
It's really intense. In this conversation, we learn Clovis isn't a fan of the king either. And Clovis asks Roran, like, what's he's going to do once he gets to Serta. And he implies here, he's basically saying he doesn't think Roran will be hanging up his hammer for a hoe when he gets to Serta.
Yeah.
And Roran replies by saying the most fucking badass thing here. He goes, then I go hunting.
Oh my God.
Revenge, baby!
He's so intense. I mean,
oh great.
The grizzled, crazy military dictator vibe is really working for Roran here.
It really is. Normally I'd be creeped out by it, but with Roran for some reason, I'm like, I will follow you to the ends of the earth.
Yes, you and all of Carvajal. You and several hundred other people. I don't think you're alone in that.
I need the Garrow diet too. I feel like
Oh my God.
all I need to be is on the run from my government to lose some weight. Anyway, Roran picks the people he wants to go to Tyr with, and from the villagers, and he chooses 5. And I'm calling them the Carvajal 5 from now on.
Great. Well, are they 6 with Roran?
Well, I guess they are 6, huh? Damn it. Then they're the Carvajal 6.
Counting's hard.
Yeah, we'll cut that out in post. No one's going to hear that. Anyway, Loring, grumpy old shoemaker's coming.
Great.
Gertrude,
Perfect pick.
rotund and healer.
Yes.
She's coming.
Great.
Bridget, wife of Quimby, and who has a grudge with Roran, but is as driven as him.
Yes, she's
coming.
as determined to make it work.
Yes.
But she is too intense, maybe?
Maybe the right amount. I don't know. I'm kind of starting. I'm sorry. She's growing on me.
Great.
Yeah. Nurfravel, son of Bridget and Quimby, stabby kid. Remember in the beginning, he was stabbing that dead
great.
body. Yep. And Mandil, which is the son of Bird, who's Sloane killed.
Oh.
And Felda, who just asked Roran, as I was mentioning, that people were asking for their troubled son. Mandil's the troubled son.
Oh,
So we got Nurfravel and Mandil.
The 2 troubled teens.
Yes, he's bringing them. So it's a crack team of adventures, and that's where we leave off.
Oh my God. Well, that leads us to chapter 51, Tyrm. This chapter opens with Roran and his elite strike force
Yes,
sneaking
best of
around
the
the
best.
city to find the best road in. But Roran is pretty concerned here that all of Tyrm essentially might be a trap, that the Empire might already be on to where they've been, where they might be likely to be headed, and like the Razak might be lying in wait in the city is kind of the vibe he's
I think he's
getting.
probably right here, right? Don't you think?
I mean, it would make sense, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's probably right.
Yes, so they first depart the barges and make one full lap of the city before they decide to like go back around to the south and enter from the south gate to make it look like they did not come from the sea or from Carvajal.
Yeah.
And they're awed by the size of the city on the road. And as they make their circuit around, nobody has ever seen any place this big in their entire life. And they see like this crazy large ship at one of the stone piers that Roran's like, okay, that might be the only ship that's able to hold all of our people. Thank God they at least have a ship that's maybe able to hold all of our people in the harbor here. And while they're on the road, they start to hurry before they get trapped outside the walls of the city. Remember Aragon and all the rolling under the closing gate of
Which
Tyr.
no one thought was weird.
No.
That guy's done this for 2 weeks.
I know. So they close the gates at sunset. So Roran and co are like, okay, better get our asses in there before it's dark.
They also rolled through. It's a Carvajal thing. They all barrel roll.
Yeah, do a barrel roll. And they are practicing their backstories on the road. I guess acting runs in the family.
Is Roran still Potter?
You know what? I think he did change his backstory. I
mean,
don't have it in my notes what he changed it to.
I don't think Potter was the way to go for him.
No, I think Horst got through to him on that in that regard, but I don't have written down what his backstory is. He did tell Mandel, the troubled asshole teen who gambles too much, that he's like, you'll be fine if you just pretend to be an aspiring seaman if anybody asks. And he, for some reason, sends Mandel like in alone away from the rest of they all try to like hide in the traffic coming in the gate. And he's like, Mandel, you go first, and this is what you tell him if they get you. He's like, what?
Me?
With the boy? Yeah. Very weird, but whatever. Roran and Loring are also rehearsing their backstories together. So they've got a collaborative improv duo shaping up here, which is kind of nice. But they end up passing through the gate without any of them even being questioned, which is great.
I love that.
So their first order of business is to find lodging at an inexpensive tavern called the Green Chestnut.
Ooh.
Sound familiar?
Isn't that where the cool
Dave?
guy was?
Yes, that's where Evan and Neil stopped in before they made it to Jode's.
Where they talked to Martin.
Martin,
right?
yes. The greedy innkeep wanted to charge them for information, and Martin was like, hey, Jode lives down the road.
Justice for Martin.
Yes. So Roran and his elite strike force are looking for provisions around the city and transportation to Serta, but they are too poor to afford either. It's not like an either or, it's a neither.
Even after robbing Clovis?
Well, they haven't robbed him yet.
Oh, okay.
They haven't paid him all the way. But
okay.
Gertrude also decides that her first order of business, she's asked some questions around the city. She wants to visit an herbalist named Angela, who may have some of the medicine she's looking for.
That's cool.
I know. I like all the ties here in this chapter. It's kind of fun. So Mandel decides he's going to accompany Gertrude to the healers. Roran kind of sets this up. He's like, you keep her safe, and Gertrude, please keep this asshole in line. And Roran and the others continue to question around the city to figure out how the hell they're going to afford to get themselves to Serta. They continue to find they lack the money to hire even the cheapest vessel, which also is just like, duh, you could not even, you can't afford the barges you've been on.
Yeah.
How on earth did you think you were going to afford a bigger, better ship and provisions for like a month-long sea voyage?
I really don't know what they were thinking
I
here.
have no idea. It seems insane. But they're talking through it and they decide like, basically, because they're stealing from Clovis already, they're like, we don't necessarily want to keep stealing. We don't think we could get away with it in the city of Tierm, first of all. Also, I guess good thinking on their part. But as they continue conferring, they're like, well, if we took the overland route from here, we couldn't stomach stealing from the regular farmers along the way. They're too much like us. And I'm like, what is the logic here? Like, we can only steal from city people, and we won't do it if we can't get away with it.
Right.
It's kind of a weird vibe.
It's like a Robin Hood situation.
It makes me feel much worse for Clovis in all of this, who just is being indiscriminately robbed, and they didn't like really question. Only Horst was like, we don't want to steal from an honest man.
Just another victim of the corrupt government of Alagasia.
Yes, and everybody was like, whatever, Clovis is kind of rich and he can make more money off of his barges, and he's a city boy, not a country boy, so we'll steal from him. I guess that's the working logic in Carvajal.
You know what? I have to say, I feel like this is a pretty common, this is real. Christopher Paolini tapped into something that actually happens, I think.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Yeah.
So Roran is starting at this point to have some doubts that maybe he ruined everybody's lives.
Oh, no.
Which I think is fair. It really is actually a stark thought process for him in this section to be like, holy shit, like, what did I do? Am I going to be able to pull this off? It's like, it doesn't look good.
I don't know, bro. It doesn't look like you might be able to.
No. So they stop by a bakery, buy some bread and honey for the night, just to provision themselves at least till the next morning. And they're talking through what their options might be, where a nice man overhears them and offers to help them find what they might need. And this guy like really seems like Martin. He's a regular old Martin. Do you think it is Martin?
Is he Martin in like a wig?
Yeah, I think so.
Hello, do you need help?
I have all the information in town.
His secret plot, Martin is actually like a Varden agent just looking to help
Pulling
sow discord.
strings.
Yeah.
So Martin. I'm like, so Martin tells them. In my head now, this guy just is Martin.
It is Martin now.
Okay, so Martin tells them that there's an auction happening in a couple of days in town for a local merchant who was recently forced to declare bankruptcy. This is a certain Jode Longshanks.
Ooh.
And the group decides that they need to act quickly. They can't wait till the day after tomorrow when the auction's going to be. Roran's like, okay, maybe we could meet up with this Jode and like offer him an under the table cash deal so he doesn't have to go through the auction process. We can get the shit we need on the cheap.
Right.
That's his plan. So they find Jode's mansion in a wealthy part of Tierm.
Ooh.
We know we love our rich friend.
Yes.
Roran knocks on the door and is met by a disapproving butler, always disapproving at Jode's door.
I love all these like sour people
Who answer
surrounding
the
the
door.
very nice and affable Jode. I think it's wonderful.
It's really funny. Yeah, so someone's always disapproving at Jode's door, but at least this time it's not his wife. She's a mess.
Oh, don't worry, Jacqui, she's coming.
Oh, that's right. So the butler initially denies them access to the house. He's like, please, you look like a bunch of rough and tumble peasants.
He just looks them up and down. He's like,
no. And Roran insists that they have business with Jode, and the butler's like, okay, I'll let him know, and goes inside. And the very next moment, the butler comes back to the door, and the chapter ends with him grudgingly letting Roran and the Carvajal Six into the manse. Dane.
which leads us to chapter 52, Jode Longshanks.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is a badass name.
Also, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is that his actual last name? I think the guy who gives him the information in the bakery is like, oh, his name's Jode. We call him Jode Longshanks out of his hearing.
Yeah.
That's like his...
I think it's like a roguish like moniker he's given.
It's like his behind the back nickname.
Yes.
Does he have a last name?
I mean, not that I know of.
Okay.
Yeah. But Jode Longshanks is the dopest name ever.
That's true.
I'm so glad we get the roguish scholar and rebel back into the story. I liked the heist in Aragon.
Yes.
I did not like Helen Longshanks, but she's back, and we get her when we get Jode. She's a package deal.
Yes.
Jode looks sad and worn when Rowan meets him, but despite the worn look, Rowan sees the steel deep in Jode.
Yes.
I love this because Jode is a businessman and scholar, but he's also like. He does have a touch of that like Indiana Jones like scholar in him. It belongs in a museum. It's problematic, but it's still cool. Their meeting starts tense. Jode is very kind.
What doesn't with Roran, to be honest?
It really is his fault.
Interpersonal skills are
bad.
A tough look.
He only has just threaten. That's I think is like it's like threaten or more threaten is kind of his
We'll
vibe.
get there, Dane. Just wait.
It's getting worse. Jode is very kind and generous, and obviously, as we're talking about, Roran is hard-edged, maybe.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Jode explains that his business and money are basically all gone. He doesn't have any. And the Empire obviously knows that Jode's been working with the Varden. That is also clear. Like that we can get that from the subtext.
Yeah.
He's essentially a target of Galbatorix, so he can't fund or supply the Varden. He has no ships. He's got no money. He's got no goods. It's all been wrecked.
Womp, womp, womp,
Yeah,
womp, womp.
he's been a target of the spies, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. Roy tries to be sly here. He explains that he wants to cut ahead and bid before the auction on Jode's stuff. And Jode gets like very interested very quickly because he's a smart dude. He knows when something's up. And he basically explains how bankruptcy works. He can't.
I do love a good economics lesson buried in a YA fantasy novel.
Yeah, I feel like this is the difference. Like when Oscar explains to Michael that you can't just declare bankruptcy in the office. Jode's like, well, you can't just come first. That's why there's an auction.
Yes.
It's so funny.
I don't own any of my stuff, so it doesn't matter what you want to pay me, just so you know.
I'm not getting paid.
Yes.
Yeah, so he's trying to explain that. He's like, I can't sell anything because my creditors own everything you see.
Yeah.
And the auction is not to enrich me. So I can't make a deal with you.
But he is interested still because Jode knows something's up.
Yeah, he wants to keep them talking. And
Yes.
And so he basically knows about Tyrim, and it's obvious he understands what's happening with all Rowan tells him. You can tell that Jode's like, okay, I'm getting what you're getting at. And when Rowan figures out something is up with Jode and knows that like maybe Jode is onto him, he gets scary and like blank.
Yes.
It's described
His
as like
spidey senses start tingling, and he's like,
the strong hammer comes out.
he's definitely given the stare down. He's definitely making, if he started the conversation in a place that was socially awkward, it's unbearable now.
Yes, it's gone to 11, right?
Yes.
So Jode accidentally recognizes Gertrude's name.
Yes. Doesn't one of the boys drop it?
Yeah.
Because I think Jode's like,
Nofravel.
yes.
Or, man, it's one of the boys. You're right.
Yes, whichever boy is with them.
It's the two. Remember, we have the two teens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think Nolfervel is with them, but Jode mentions that next door is the herbalist's shop.
Yes.
That Gertrude was looking for, and the boy's like, oh, good, we'll tell Gertrude.
Yes. And then all of a sudden, Jode's like, you're Rowan Garrow's son. And then it's like, full on, which takes us to your chapter.
Yes. It ends on a little bit of a cliffhanger hanger there.
I thought Joe was going to get murdered the first time I read this.
Absolutely.
I was like, no, not Joe.
It was a really close call,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Oof.
So that takes us to chapter 53, An Unexpected Ally. Hopefully that's already a tip-off that it's a little sub-murder.
Yes.
So the chapter picks up right where the last one left off, with Roran preparing to launch himself out of his chair with his hammer at Jode when the use of his surname actually stops him in his tracks. So, he watches Jode's face light up at the mention of Gertrude's name. Roran grabs the hammer and then he says, you're Roran, and Roran comes out of the chair, and then Jode says, Roran Garrow's son, and like Roran stops dead hearing his dad's name. So, I mean, I think I just got to give big ups to Garrow. saving the day from beyond the grave.
Oh
that guy is better than he was written.
That's true. Everything
he
that's
did not
happened
deserve that.
That's Garrow adjacent after Garrow was in the story has been better than the Garrow we got in the story.
Absolutely correct.
You're totally right.
Yes. So the rest of the villagers are ready to pounce at a word from Roran. They see how he's reacted. They know Jode's on to them.
Yeah.
So they're ready also to do a bunch of murder.
They're also all murderers now.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when Jode mentions Aragon, Roran drops back into his seat. I think he's truly shocked. Can't stand, is so shocked.
Well, also, he's got luring, which was the quote I read earlier when he was jumping around with pitchforks.
Yes.
So he knows he can lay back because luring will kill Jode for him.
Yeah, that's true. Jode also uses his friendship with Brom. So he drops Brom's name to buy himself some credibility with these villagers from Carvajal. And he really genuinely wants to be able to talk openly with them. We know that from where we sit. And we're like, you guys want the same things. But it's so tense. They're understandably, I think, wary, not knowing who he is.
Yeah.
And knowing that there's pictures of Roran's face all over the place in Aragon.
It's fair.
Yes. So Roran threatens Jode's life, becoming a bit of a habit here, I think. But he does agree to tell Jode how they got to Tyrm and what their goal is. And Jode reacts to this story that, like, this insane yarn that Roran weaves in, basically much the same way he reacted to Aragon and Brom's tale of their flight from Carvajal. He's like utterly shocked. I think Jode like sits back in his chair and is like, a more fantastical tale I've never heard. He's is so happy, I think, that just like all this crazy shit is happening in the world again.
Isn't he also just like, you people from Carvajal are fucking nuts?
I think so. Yeah, for sure. So Jode is just getting ready to, quid pro quo, give up his story for theirs. When his loving wife comes through and tries to bang down the door to his office, basically. Roran stands up, puts a knife to Jode's throat from behind him, and is like, make her go. Oof. So Jode's like, honey, doing a bit of a business deal here. And she, in response, absolutely roasts his ass. I'm gonna read it just because.
What'd she say? Let's hear it.
She says, liar, you don't have any business. You're bankrupt. Come out and face me, you coward. Are you a man or not that you won't even look your wife in the eye? She paused for a second, as if expecting a response. Then her screeches increased in volume. No. Coward, you're a gutless rat, a filthy, yellow-bellied sheep biter without the common sense to run a meat stall, much less a shipping company. My father would never have lost so much money.
Brutal. That last line's brutal.
The father stuff is absolutely ruthless from Helen. I laughed as an adult, I laughed so hard when I read this, which is very sad.
I read this and I was like, oh, that sucks.
It does suck. I mean, it's just like, because it's not true, so you're just like, holy shit, his wife must be pissed.
Yeah, she's got it. I mean, I think at this point I was unsure whether she knew about the Varden stuff.
Yeah.
So like I didn't know if she was just mean to him knowing that he was like a rebel.
Yeah.
Like I was confused by this, especially as a kid.
I thought maybe he told Brom and Aragon that was part of like all his secrecy when he met with them. Why he's like, oh, we can't talk about shit in front of Helen. She just thinks I'm a regular merchant.
Yeah, I'm just a regular guy.
Yeah.
I must have forgotten that as a kid. Because here I was like, I mean, he's trying to save the world.
Vicious.
I know.
He does, in response to this, bring out the big stern husband guns to dismiss her again. Yes, he's like, woman, you will leave me be to my business dealings.
I thought you were going to be like, why I yada. I thought you were doing
that. The vibe is kind of like that.
Oh, okay. Oh, no.
I mean, he doesn't threaten to like hit her or anything. He just is like, leave me alone. You're just not but a woman.
You're being hysterical.
A bit, yeah. And she's like, oh, sure, loving husband. Like, I will await you at the dinner table where you'll tell me all about this alleged meeting you're in there having. And if you don't join me, I'll don't bother coming to see me ever again. I'm basically gone and dead to you. And I'm like, oh shit, we knew Jode's marriage was on the rocks from the last time we saw him, but it is on the brink of collapse here.
Do you think she's already filed divorce or do you think she's just thinking about it?
I think maybe legal separation separation at this point, and we're waiting for official divorce proceedings. A bleak joke
Poor
to make.
Jode. And we're both laughing.
Ick.
Poor Jode.
So Jode explains at this point to the villagers of Carbajal that his trouble with his wife, he's like, yes, you must be wondering why my wife and I hate each other, is because she has no idea that he's the Varden's agent. So this is the first they're getting this information as well. So he's like, surprise, surprise, I work for the Varden. She has no idea.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And that's why my business is crumbling. And they're like, not great, but also maybe you could help us.
Yeah.
They're still a little wary. And then Jode drops also hate to be the one to tell you this, Roran, but your cousin is the new writer from all those rumors. Jode's the one to drop the bomb.
Yeah.
Roran's only reaction is laughter. Roran just laughs aloud and like maniacally a little bit. But Jode has the facts to back the whole thing up. And he knows things that were in like Brahm's notes, stuff that happened with the Razak and Carvajal before Aragon left. And at this point, Roran's anger at Aragon is completely renewed. He's like, that motherfucker had a dragon and didn't tell us, and like put Garrow's life in danger, like.
And it's I have to say I really kind of agree with Roran's anger. Not that like Aragon could have done anything different, frankly.
Yes.
And he tried to do good things, but like Roran, I would be as mad as
I
Roran
totally
is
understand
mad.
it. I don't know that I like agree with it on the facts on principle,
Yes.
but from his point of view,
Yes.
empathetically with Roran, I totally would be.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I think this is one of the first books where I was like, oh my God, they're both right, but they're both wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So Jode puts a bit of a pin in that whole anger thing. He's watching Roran get keyed up and he's like, ooh, that was probably a bad choice for me in my life. But he reveals that when Brahm and Aragon were in town, he kind of goes over heist plot Ocean's 3, and he reveals that they found the Razak's lair from the shipping records in Helgrind. So that's getting Roran like back on board. He's like, oh, great, revenge plot.
Yes.
Thank God.
Hell yeah.
Yes, Roran's chomping at the bit to go immediately, but Jode is able to talk some sense into him here, which I like. He says that if they can make it to Serta, Aragon is sure to be there with the Varden, or they'll be able to have access and communicate with the Varden more reliably in Serta.
Yeah.
And Jode's like, I met your cousin. He's just a fucking bean farming kid. He'll help you. Absolutely. If you make it there, like, you will actually stand a chance against the Razak in a way you absolutely do not at this current juncture.
Yeah.
So you should probably do that, which Roran does agree with. And Jode continues on about Brahm's death, Murtagh, Gilead, and the prison break.
Oh, wow. So he's got everything.
Farthendur, the battle with the Urgals. He knows everything, and it's not
updated.
necessarily clear exactly how. I mean, to send supplies back and forth to the Varden, we'd assume, I guess, he's in contact with somebody, but like all the contact seems very unreliable. Like the runners are getting intercepted. I'm just like,
well, wasn't even that the problem with the Razak coming to Carvajal in the first place? Is they got information from a runner going to Brahm, presumably?
yes. So I'm surprised, like Jode being this long-term agent in Tyrm is still like kind of reliably getting his runners. But I'm glad that he is because he knows everything.
Interesting.
And as the Carvajal 6 kind of mull this over, they're like, that's the fucking craziest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And they kind of decide it's too crazy to be a lie. They're like,
if you're gonna lie about something less crazy. Man.
yes, like you would never make up something this crazy. Brahm, the storyteller? You're kidding. And it's like, oh, you guys. He was clearly suspicious. And Jode goes on to explain, so they're still like letting him get his story out. So he goes on to explain how precarious his situation is in Tyrm with the bankruptcy and his crumbling business, and like how if he leaves, he's very likely to be found. But he's like, maybe if I leave and we create a big enough distraction, we might get away with it. So he basically decides it's ripe time for some good old fashioned piracy on the high seas, Dane.
Hell yeah.
And he tells them all about that big ass, very nice ship they saw in the harbor. Apparently it is the biggest ass, nicest ass ship that's ever been constructed. It's called the Dragon Wing.
Well, cool name.
Yes, very cool. And he's like, I think I could have a plan to intercept it. Gather round and I'll explain to you. And I think the chapter truly ends with like a here's what we're going to do ... fade to black, which I fucking love. What's next?
Yes, which takes us to a really great chapter. Chapter 54, Escape.
Yes.
Well, man with the plan, Jode for the win. This chapter was the heist we all wanted in the first book. My heart was pounding during this chapter. I loved it.
Me too. Can I just say, okay, I know we had a bit of a philosophical debate on the degree of piracy previously with the barges.
Yeah.
I think this is what colors my this is old-fashioned piracy. That was a little more economical proposition piracy.
Oh my gosh. If you're a bargeman out there and you're offended that your barges aren't fancy enough to be pirates, you can write an email to Jacqui. She'll
go for it. Any bargemen out there, by all means, I'd like to know that you exist.
I hope we get an email. It's like, as a bargeman, I'm offended.
Fair.
Anyway, the Roran and the Carvajal Six stay with Jode for a day, which must have been amazing after the trip.
A rich friend.
I know.
I mean, yes, his wealth is rapidly
decline. Well, he's living off credit now. His creditors.
That's true.
He's truly rich.
Yeah, and he really doesn't give a shit at this point. But his house is still nice as hell. I think is the way they describe it.
A ton of food and dude. So Jode goes to tell his wife that he's an open agent of the Varden, and ask her if she wants to flee with him. Loring calls Jode's wife an ogress, which made me cackle. It's fucking hilarious.
Helen's a little bit of a tough look, but I guess here too, I'm like, yeah, I kind of get it.
Yeah, she has every reason to be mad. It's just we like Jode, so it's like
I know.
Anti-Helen, right?
I mean, she has a reason to be mad that he seems to be just doing scholarly work instead of making his business function and turn a profit. So that's been most of their marriage. And now she's like, oh, also on top of that, you've been lying to me since the day we met.
Well, and on top of that, what if she's a true empire believer? On top of that, he's a terrorist.
Yeah,
you know
that's
what I
true.
mean? It's just man, that's a rough look, dude.
Yeah.
So as they rest, Bridget asks Roran if he hates Aragon, and Roran says yes and no.
Yeah.
It's complicated, man.
Yeah. We love some nuance from Roran.
Yeah. Bridget actually says, look, that's how I feel about you. And they have to help each other, but after, Bridget's going to go after him.
Great.
He feels comforted by her because he understands how she feels. The comfort of revenge, like a warm blanket.
I understand the darkness in you. The darkness in you responds to the darkness in me, but someday you might kill me. And about that, I worry.
Yes, it's so funny. So Jode pleads to his wife. He's nice, but I get why she's mad, like we said. It's just sad.
Yeah.
She asks if he's going to be important in the Varden.
Yeah.
And if he would have a good position in Serta. And, it's kind of nice.
She's a little, poor little rich girl. She obviously had a rich daddy who could do no wrong.
Who would never mess up the...
And now she's just are we going to be, important when we get to Serta? Or are we going to be peasants like all these weirdos that you're taking me with?
And Joe kind of thinks I'm going to save the Aragon's brother cousin.
Yeah.
And I found the egg.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of a big deal. It's kind of what he says to her.
He's not wrong.
Yeah. Roran talks to Mandel about him being a shit, and it's hilarious.
About the gambling.
Yeah, it's a good chat.
Didn't he gamble away his family's food?
Yes.
He's really
he's kind of not
on the
best.
rocks.
Yeah. It's a good chat. Everyone is an enemy now is basically the gist of that chat.
Yes, love that.
Yeah, I love what he's putting into this little kid's mind. He's like, everyone's an enemy. Everyone can't be trusted.
So you have to be on your guard all the time. You cannot afford to have vices, basically, because everybody wants you dead.
Exactly. So he sends...
tight 15-year-old boy.
Yeah. No, he actually doesn't put him to bed. He sends the young man who's on the rocks and could easily pass as a aspiring seaman.
Oh, right.
Yes, to give a message to deliver to horse.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. It needs to be top secret, and it's very important.
God.
Because there are Empire spies watching Jode's house.
Yes.
So it also he needs to ditch spies.
Uh-oh.
What could go wrong?
Yeah.
He's a little dramatic about it, but that's kind of Roran and Eric's shtick. So anyway, pretty quick. It's time for the theft. 3 hours before dawn. It's heist time.
Yes. Pirate time, Dane.
Yeah, sorry.
Get your lingo
Pirate time.
Pirate heist time.
It's pirate heist time.
Compromise.
It's pirate heist revenge time. Anyway, Jode comes with his rapier. Helen does not come.
No, she stays at home.
I know. He brings
He's
a sword.
really sad, too.
I know. Brings a sword, leaves his woman. Sad. They sneak to the boat until they get to the guards at the harbor. They get through that and meet up with Jode's sailors. Roran likes what he sees in the men because they look rough and tumble. And he's like, yes, me too.
Exactly what I pictured for piracy.
Yeah, game, recognized game.
Yes,
you know?
exactly.
There's this cool moment where Jode's like pirate men start talking shit about Bridget and her son Norfolville and how they can't trust like fighting next to a woman and a child.
Yes.
And Bridget kicks one of the guys in the groin and then puts a knife to the other guy's neck. And she's like, any questions, bitches?
Exactly.
And I gotta say, I get what Quimby was into. I'm starting to, I'm like, I like a competent lady.
Oh, God. A violent lady.
I mean, she could throw me around, tussle me. I don't know. I like it. Anyway, the group makes their way to the ship. And first, they sit and watch to check out the ship. They want to get where the guards are. The tension grows. As I was reading this, I was like, oh, no, they're going to get caught at any moment.
No.
So Ronan and Jode, Ronan and one of Jode's men strip down, and they slowly climb into the water. I'm imagining like knives in their mouth type situation.
It's got to be, right?
Yes,
like
yes.
eyeballs just poking above the surface.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
And they're going to climb up the ship. Roran waits until Bridget starts talking. So there's 2 soldiers on the ship, like in the front.
Yes.
And there's 2 soldiers like in the back.
Yes.
And so Roran hand over hand climbs the anchor
So
chain
cool.
as she's talking to the guards, and then he sneaks up and like stabs them with the other guy.
Fucking crazy.
Yes, and Bridget like knocks them out. Anyway, I don't think they stab anybody actually. They get knocked out.
Oh, okay.
So they succeed. Bridget and Norfolville wave the rest up. And they pull the gangplank up behind them.
Yep.
They go under and find 4 more men.
Oh.
And they capture them as well. And Bridget is the badass who gets 2. She gets half.
She's crazy. So at this point, she's fully like disarmed and incapacitated, like 1 guy on deck,
Yes.
2 guys below.
Yes.
And out of 6 guys,
It's her.
it's been 3 guys, all to Bridget.
She's a badger. She's.
I hope Jode's sailor feels really bad for talking shit about her.
And do you
now.
think Roran feels more comforted, or do you think he's like, well, I didn't think she was that effective?
No, I think he knew. I think
Yeah.
he saw the crazy in her eyes.
He's like, I like you're crazy too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think he's that's exactly what he was hoping for Bridget.
Yeah. We find out that one of the Jode's guys, the one Bridget kicked in the groin, he's gonna be captain.
Oh, good.
His name is Uthar.
Love that. Good name.
Yeah, they take 2 hours to get the ship ready.
This seemed crazy to
The
me.
tension. Can
I
you
know.
imagine for 2 hours?
No, dude.
Dude, they ditch all the supplies they don't need out the back, and as they're doing this, someone comes and everyone freaks
Yes,
out.
they're like we've been got.
We're caught. It's
Yeah.
too early. We can't get caught now. And it's Helen.
Yes,
Yeah, yay, Jode.
love is real.
Nice. So beautiful.
Jode's hot but mean wife.
Yeah. I want to
Came
know what love is.
Oh God.
Okay.
The singing.
Yeah. Sorry, I just imagine Jode at the harbor looking down at her. I want you to show
Okay,
me.
okay.
Like reaching out. Anyway, so this part confused me a little bit. I had trouble picturing it, but the harbor is not walled completely to the coastline. So the city itself is walled.
Yes.
And then you go outside of it and there's the harbor. So you can walk along the coast into the harbor but not be in Tiram.
Yes.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. So that took me a while to like figure out. So what happens is all of the villagers start to literally just walk directly from the coast
Yes.
into the harbor and then walk straight to the ship.
Yes.
It's so intense. And then we have like 4 things all happen at once.
Yeah. Shit pops off.
Yeah. The villagers are coming up, but they're not all on the boat yet. The sailors on the Dragon Wing load and light the ballista ammunition. So it has like all these ballista on it.
Yeah.
An alarm is raised by the harbor soldiers who start to see like hundreds of villagers running towards a boat.
Seems a little suspicious.
Yeah, so they're like, what the fuck? And they set the alarm. Uthar and the sailors start shooting flaming shots into the harbor buildings and boats of
Crazy.
Tiram. And they shoot in several volleys.
Yes.
The fires start and create a barrier that the soldiers, like the fire is so big in the boats in the harbor.
Absolutely savage, dude.
Yeah.
They're just like, we're out of town. Burn it up.
They burn
Light
the
it up.
whole thing down.
Yes.
And the soldiers cannot get to the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah, the harbor's on fire. The smoke covers like them being shot. There's so much smoke.
Crazy.
Yeah. Uthar and his soldiers shoot out more and they can't even
Now
see
they're
the
just
soldiers.
blindly.
Yeah, it's wild. The villagers all make it on and then Uthar starts to get them into the oars. So all of the people are like shoved down to the oars.
Yes.
The men are like supposed to guard the ship. Everyone's like rowing, and they leave, and they get away.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah,
The success rate of heist plots and prison breaks in this series is
100%.
bar none. Yeah.
That's so amazing. They all get away. So Ronan Judge saved the entire village,
Yes.
stolen a war galley,
Crazy.
and set sail to Serta.
Yeah.
It's not all fun and games, though, as
Okay.
3 themes quickly become apparent, like within like 24 hours.
Yeah.
The ship is too crowded for comfort.
Yes.
No one is happy.
Yeah.
The food will have to be rationed.
Yes.
It was not enough for everybody. And disease is likely to spread as there's just so many people like close together.
The real threat was scurvy all along.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Other than that, this chapter ends with the logistics and management of this voyage just being deeply worked out in a beautiful scene where Helen accepts Jode's apology.
Yeah, that's really nice.
Yeah. Just kidding. The Rozak arrive on a leather block on the broad daylight. It's fucking dope.
Like through the smoke,
Yes.
right? Oh,
And
so good.
It flies towards them, and it's like immediately on. It's like screeching, and it seems that the Rozak is not acting normal as they've seen. It like doesn't like it doesn't look like it likes the water or the sun.
Yeah.
And I really like this because it reminds me kind of the Murderall from Wheel of Time.
Oh, yeah.
Or like the ring wraiths from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Or even like Dracula, like vampires and shit.
Yes.
So I like this little detail.
Because the Murderall, right, they're like strongest in the shadows.
Yes.
It's not like they're allergic to the sun, but
No,
they're.
they don't want to be around it.
Yes.
Same thing with water. They don't want to like
that's
them
right.
and the Trollocs don't want to go over the moving water.
That's right.
Ring wraiths, same thing.
Yes.
Anyway, Baldur, and I'm telling you, this guy
Oh my
would be
God.
a top pick for the bracket. He kneels immediately, strings his bow, and all the
Fucking crazy.
villagers cover him. And then he like stands up really quick, pulls back, aims and shoots and hits the leather block.
Oh my God.
Hell yeah. It like runs away.
Yes, he.
Dude.
Strike Force Baldur.
Baldur saves the day.
A
Baldur.
one-man strike team.
Yeah, Baldur Strongbow. That's what I'm calling. Yeah, you got strong hammer and his right hand man
And
strong
his-
bow.
And his boy wonder strongbow.
Yeah, exactly. And that's it. Woo.
Oh my God. I loved reading Piracy on the High Seas.
So good.
So fun. And I'm not always necessarily a sucker for a pirate book, but
No?
not always.
Okay.
I mean, sometimes it can get old. I do like it a lot.
I'm about to
but
say, I've never read a book where I'm
here-
like, well, I need less pirates.
You've never had the pirate thing get a little old? Maybe just our real life book club member, AJ, is getting to me. He hates a pirate book.
He does. He's like, I will not read it.
Yes, maybe his cynicism on piracy is clouding my judgment in my old age.
I think that might be it.
It's fair. Well, that does take us to chapter 55, Child's Play, and we're back with Neswata.
Ooh.
I would like to just lodge the complaint early on. I hate the title of this chapter.
Oh.
It gives me the ick.
Okay.
Especially for what the chapter's about. I
Oh.
just don't like it.
I can see that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, this short little chapter opens with Triana showing the Lace Gang's newest pattern to Neswata.
Of course, the Slattern is running the lace game. What's next? You gonna do lingerie?
I mean, I hope so.
I'm just kidding. I
The
love it.
ladies of Allegazia need to feel pretty sometimes.
They need to
Dane.
look fancy.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
So just as Triana is turning to go, Neswata's like, great work, no notes. You guys
Yeah.
are the fucking best. I'm so glad this is working out exactly how I pictured. And
Are we so rich?
yes, aren't we so rich? Triana's like, yes, we are. I'm still mad to be doing it, but I understand. And just as Triana's turning to go, like a flurry of activity happens at the door, which ends with Elva tackling Neswata as a dart flies through the window of this upstairs chamber that they're in to land and like lodge itself in the wall.
Fucking crazy.
Crazy. Elva explains that an assassin trained in dark magic by Galbatorix threw the dart, and Elva has fulfilled her promise by protecting Neswata. So
Yeah.
she's like, I'm already living up to the bargain here, girl. And the whole time Elva's telling this, she's like vomiting and like shaking, and she like feels crazy. And Neswata's like, what is, you were doing the thing, you're protecting me, what is wrong? And Elva like, I just cannot help. I picture her like smiling through a like mouthful of bile.
Gross.
And she's like, well, I maybe have protected you, but I know I'm causing pain to the assassin who's like in this room of this inn in the city, and you're about to send your men.
Doesn't she
to
imply
get him.
they're gonna kind of torture that guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, dude. So she gives up the guy's plot, tells Niswata exactly where he is. Niswata obviously sends the guards immediately. And the chapter kind of wraps with her having a little existential crisis, hot on the heels of a near death, which I think is fair.
That's fair.
Yes.
And the weird, like, black magic kid
yes,
is the one that, like, ugh.
For sure. But she's wondering, like, what is going to become of the Varden and the war effort without her. She's like, shit, I've not prepared well for, like, how real the threat of assassination is, basically. And the next chapter, 56, Premonition of War, picks up just 2 hours later. And I'm going to do the summary for this chapter too, because it was not enough to just do the gross chapter with Elva.
Right? So
I demanded more, demanded justice.
I mean, I got the heist, pirate heist. I'm not going to...
I want something cool, not just vomiting child assassin savior. So 2 hours later, Niswata's guards escort the limp assassin into her chambers. They're just like dragging a limp body between the two of them. Turns out the man's name was Drayle, and he suicided himself with magic when he was caught.
No.
Not good. Before he was able to off himself, they did find out a little bit about him by like sifting through his memories. So now she's kind of getting this update from like Triana and Duvranger Gata. He was part of an assassin network called the Black Hand, which is run at Gal's behest. And Triana thinks it's possible that all of Gal Batorx's agents in Serta are able to use magic because Drayle was. So I'm like, oh, this looks dicier and dicier by the ever-loving moment.
So is the implication here that Gal's like training black magicians?
Yes, I think so.
Ooh.
And they call themselves the Black Hand, which is metal as hell.
Metal as hell, dude.
But very ominous.
It's ominous, but I kind of like it. But I don't like it because it's bad guys. But I kind of like it.
Yes, it definitely seems bad. And Niswata is just like, holy shit, we're gonna have some issues here. But since they're in Serta, one of her first thoughts is about King Orin, which I think is kind of nice of her. And she asks Elva if she would be able to also extend the same protection to King Orin as she's currently extending to Niswata. And Elva kind of agrees to this in like a passing way. And Niswata, I think, might have to do a little more convincing on this to this end at some point, but we'll see. We do learn that one of Duvranger Gata's duties in general is to look for magic agents trying to do espionage. And so Niswata's kind of surprised that they weren't able to find this guy Drayle right away. But basically what that means is that they're like doing a Patriot Act to spy on people inside of the Varden itself to figure out where enemies are trying to break into mines, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's Varden Watch 2023.
Yes, it's not
good.
Not good. And Triana, though, in her mental sifting for Drayle, was able to learn some of the identities of some other Black Hand members in Serta before Drayle bit it. So Niswata wants Triana to use this information to eradicate the organization, like however they can. So she's like, keep spying on our people, keep spying on their people.
She's like, for the safety of everyone, we must remove their privacy.
A little sketch,
it's
a thing that gives me a big ick.
Yeah, I like Niswata. I understand why she's doing it. I think it's the right move, but I also am like, man, this is the beginning of like
some shit.
Like just like gray area dealings.
Yes. Well, it's also kind of interesting to me. I guess the reason I include the spying part of it, other than like moral implications, is that it's really interesting to me to kind of picture like, it's maybe not exactly described this way, but I picture them like physically being able to see like thoughts being siphoned away from somebody's mind. So that's why they're spying on the people inside the Varden, because they're like, oh, well, then we can tell very easily whose minds are under attack and like trace it back to this assassin network. So I just thought that was very interesting.
That is very interesting.
At this opportune moment, a messenger comes to summon Niswata to attend Orin and a joint council meeting, it seems like. Joint chiefs.
Yeah, the joint chiefs.
Yes,
together.
it's like the council of elders of the Varden plus Orin's certain council, whatever their political structure is. And so Niswata's like, fine, whatever, we'll go. Life goes on.
Yeah.
And she takes Elva with her and basically just tells her guards, like, make sure you burn that guy. And like my maid, who, remember, we met her maid, Farrakha, she's like, Farrakha, make sure the carpet's clean from all the blood and vomit. And I was like, ugh.
God.
So when they get to the joint council meeting, Elva gets a very chilly reception, to put it lightly, from Serta's prime minister. And I'm like, they have a prime minister? Who knew? He calls her an abomination when she walks in the room. He's
great.
like, why have you brought that abomination in here? And Niswada defends her, saying like, listen, she just saved me from being assassinated. You're all welcome. And everybody is shook to know that the assassination plot just happened, and Niswada's like, Oren, I'll tell you about it later, but none of the rest of y'all get to know.
Yeah, this is leadership stuff.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me. I like her. I mean, her political savvy still is like peak, even under duress.
I think that's a political move, right? To put that guy down a little bit.
Yes.
Down a peg.
Absolutely.
Be like, well, the important people will talk about it.
Yes,
Yeah.
precisely. So I think also in reference to, the important business of Oren being George Bush, and you thought Niswada was his Dick Cheney.
An effective, not evil Dick Cheney.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and lobby that this prime minister who is an asshole is Oren's Dick Cheney, if that's all right with you.
That's fair.
I'd like to submit a motion.
Yes. We will review and submit it. We approved.
Okay, thank you so much. I feel a lot better now. I've been very uncomfortable. But down to business at this Joint Chiefs meeting, Oren has just received a troubling report from one of his trusted informants in the empire that all of these rebel forces have been mistaken apparently for months about Galbatorix's armies. So instead of a force of 16,000 soldiers who have been holing up in Gilead, there are 100,000 troops, and they've just been spotted marching past the capital of Urubane towards Serta. Bad news.
This is magic, right?
Bad news bears. Yes.
Okay.
They definitely conclude that their spies, there's been an illusion essentially that has tricked their spies into thinking the wrong information. Very, very, very bad. It gets worse. Fear not.
It gets worse.
Of course it gets worse. They know
the dragon wing. It's been stolen.
No, not that. Anything but that. That would be funny. But no, actual very bad news. They know for an illusion of this size to have worked on their agents, the only person who could have been doing the magic is Galbatorix himself. So they're like, oh, great. He's coming to participate in the conflict, out in the open. He's taking an active hand in this war. They don't know to what extent yet, but any hint that he's not just chilling in the capital is very, very, very bad.
Yeah, you don't want him out there doing his thing.
No.
That's not good.
No, they're scared as fuck.
100,000 people?
Very bad.
That's very... Don't they have it's 4,000 Varden soldiers or something like that?
I think that's how many they had in Trondheim. We knew at that point that there were Varden soldiers in Serta already.
The bulk of their army was in Serta.
Yes. And then Serdans also presumably are in Serta, so hopefully they're adding.
She was begging him for more soldiers.
I know, God. So there's that. And then maybe we'll get dwarves, maybe we'll get elves, but that's kind of a wing and a prayer situation, I'm thinking. And they're thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Niswada knows she needs to get in touch with Aragon and the elves ASAP. Yeah. She's like, we definitely need Aragon and Saphira back.
She's like, I need my Nokia.
Yesterday.
I need to call them right away.
Yes, but she knows she doesn't have a direct line into Ellesmere right now. Arya's on her way back to Serta.
There's no cell service in Ellesmere.
No, very bad. Too many trees, Dane. So until Arya makes it back to Serta, back to the Varden, she's not going to have any way to get in touch with them. And she's thinking if the timing works out right, Aragon and Saphira might, just by the skin of their teeth, make it by the time Gal's army reaches Serta. But the elves writ large absolutely will not. And then Oren asks Niswada to call in Hrothgar and the dwarves from Trondheim. Remember the mirror system through all the tunnels. So he's activate the mirrors, girl. We need anyone we can get.
Is that scene in Lord of the Rings where it's and they're lighting all the towers?
Yes, exactly.
10-minute montage of towers.
Well, I guess we could at least picture the mirrors built into stone. Very cool on a big pivot system.
Guys pulling it.
I'm just picturing somebody standing with like a compact, like a powder makeup mirror.
They're powdering their face, and all of a sudden they just turn it.
Yeah, for like 1 second to flash a little. No, I guess it's not like that.
Another dwarf braiding his. Oh
shit. Yeah, so I guess I'll picture more Lord of the Rings style. Now that you've brought that up, that's
they're
better.
Big mirrors that they have to pull with like ropes and pulleys.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
very neat.
Very masculine.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so the chapter ends, and this episode set of chapters ends as Oren presents Neswata with a complaint from the Weavers Guild.
Oh, what could that
in
be
Serta.
about?
You know, Dan, just some suspiciously cheap lace that's hit the market.
Oh.
And he's like, I would never think that like anything that you had anything to do with this. It's crazy, just like cheap lace, right? Yeah. But you know, we rulers, we have to bring up this dumb bullshit is truly how he thinks of it. And she's like, oh no, that was us. Yeah. She's like, we made it. I made it with magic because I'm a genius.
Yeah.
And also she points out rightly, he forced her hand into that situation. And when he balks at this, he's like, the livelihood of my people is at stake. Like, I have hundreds of artisans throughout my kingdom that that are going to be bankrupt now, essentially. And we've seen from Jode, bankruptcy is bad.
It's not good.
No.
You don't own your assets. The creditors do.
Yes. And Neswata pulls just the icon move of all icon moves at the end of this section. She is like, oh, if you guys are having some trouble with money, I'd be happy to loan you some.
Oh, slam dunk.
So good. I'm like, we stan our queen president. She does no wrong. I love her so much.
You know what's great about Neswata?
Everything?
Yes.
I'm like, what?
But she looked at the situation.
Yes.
And she analyzed it. And she found the solution.
It's time for analysis.
Do you want to get into a little bit of analysis for what we just covered? For me, so much of the plotting in this section ties back to the central theme of threats. I mean, how could it really be anything else? That's practically Roran's native language at this point, and he's really the biggest feature of this set of chapters.
Yes.
But I do like that we're getting a lot of this idea sprinkled through several characters' plot lines. I mean, albeit at the hands of Roran, but it does affect several other characters we've come to know and love. So with Clovis, our poor barge boy is under threat yet again to stay parked outside of Tyrm in danger and against his will. That's the very first opening scene of this section.
And presumably robbed, right?
Yes, of course. Sets the tone. With Jode, the threat of bankruptcy closing in around him is allowing him to finally actually break free of the double life he's been leading for so long and go to Serta to throw his lot in with the Varden openly. So kind of threats having a positive in some ways effect on Jode.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have to pretend as much anymore, right?
Yes, exactly.
He just do what he wants.
It is working out pretty well for him so far.
Yeah.
He stole a big ass boat and his wife still loves him. So
he came clean with his wife.
Under threat. And I mean, on top of that, if his wife herself isn't a threat, I don't really know what is. I just think her whole character being present in this section kind of ties to the theme of threats.
I mean, those pirates and soldiers could have stabbed Roran, but nothing is gonna stay with you like the comparison of how your father-in-law would have never let this happen.
The threat of emotional abuse.
Joe's gonna be late at night staring at a ceiling thinking about that 20 years from now.
For the rest of his life, Dane. Absolutely. I'm going to be thinking of that on this fictional character's behalf for years.
I'm hung up on it now.
Yes. But I do want to focus on Roran for a bit here. He's the resident master of threatening someone's life to get what he wants.
Yeah.
And he's really turned it up to 1,000,000 in his last few scenes. I mean, even before we got to this section, his past few scenes with, Clovis and the villagers, exodus from Carvajal. He's literally threatened the lives of every single person in the village of Carvajal at this point.
It's this or walk.
Yes. Something he's done on two different occasions.
Wasn't the first one, it's this or die.
Yes. And I'm just like, okay, we get it. So he's threatened every single person from his hometown, people he loves enough to take them on his journey.
Yeah. Well, he does it because he loves.
Right.
Yes.
And he's also threatened a solid 2/3 of the people he's met or interacted with in the time since he's left Carvajal.
My favorite threat is the pottery threat. I'm a potter.
Just the thinly veiled threat of ceramic arts.
Yeah. Fucking come after you.
Yes. And it has been been kind of interesting, I will say, in a way, to watch Roran discover something that he's clearly good at, that's clearly working for him, and just hammer that strategy over and over and over.
Oh my God. Nice.
Yes.
You hit the nail on the head on that one.
Thank you. I really tried. But I think it's interesting that in this section, so obviously we've been building his like character revolving around threats for a while, but in this section, we finally see him feeling the threat of self-doubt when they arrive in Tierm, which I think is interesting. Their prospects are bleak before they find Jode, and the threat to Roran's self-confidence over the possibility that he might fail the people he's responsible for is a really stark and jarring like line sequence, that like introspection that he has for a couple minutes there. I think it's at such contrast to what otherwise is like a fun and festive high seas adventure in a lot, like it's a high action scene.
Yes.
It's very fun to read. There's like definitely some comedy and lightheartedness in Roran's plotline here. I think all the stuff with what we know about Jode versus what the villagers know about him plays as comedic in a lot of ways until they find it out. Like
Bridget and the like pirates, like her kicking their ass.
Yes, exactly.
That's kind of funny.
Yes. So I think like just writing style wise, with so much comedy in this section, having that really deep and introspective, like precursor to guilt, essentially.
Yeah.
And Roran's really struggled with guilt already. We talked a little bit about, guilt and responsibility being some of the values Garrow instilled in both boys, and something that they've had to struggle with and overcome. And having this like threat of guilt essentially weigh so heavily on Roran, I think is like makes it even starker, makes it even more prominent in the section when it's otherwise very fun, I think.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah. And I love that the last scene in Roran's plotline here involves the Razak. I think that's a really good way to keep Roran's most persistent threat top of mind. I think as they head out on the seas, they've talked a little bit about how Razak are afraid of the open water.
Yeah.
So I think we already know we're not going to be seeing them for a while. So I think it's a good last ditch, like, don't forget about these guys. Threats on threats on threats.
I want revenge.
Yes, we do want revenge. Roran wants revenge. But I think that's a really good wrap up, like leaving him with his most lingering, biggest threat,
Still there.
Yes, exactly. And so to shift gears a little bit to Naswada, just a couple of like shortish chapters on her here. But I think obviously there's nothing maybe more prominent in her plot line here than threats.
It's only threats, really.
Yes, yeah. And I think it's one of the situations that Christopher Paolini so often is able to seed so well in his writing, where like something maybe a little smaller, faster, more immediate is being used to foreshadow something that's a little bigger and more amorphous. So I think, the concrete and immediate threat of assassination here is being used to foreshadow like the more persistent and like much bigger, much more existential threat of Galbatorix and the war and his soldiers. So I really like that. But here, I will say, maybe you disagree. We talked about it a little bit.
Okay.
This device, just the way it's framed, I think in these two chapters back to back, is leaving me a little hopeful for once, at least for Naswada, because I'm thinking if they're able to thwart the assassination attempt, and it's clearly being used for foreshadowing, do you think it bodes well for the war, even though the threat from the Empire's increased force seems insurmountable?
I remember feeling torn, and I guess I do even on this reading. I think you're right. There's a little bit of hope. Like, Elva is there. None of the important people are going to die immediately, or no big plots are going to come out immediately. But I do think that, Elva's just one person. There's a whole army here.
Yeah.
And if there's 100,000 threats, and maybe Galbatorix is one of them, I still feel like the Varden's not very. There's just the elves haven't even moved yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess it's one of those situations where maybe the 100,000 soldiers could seem like something like the insurmountable number of miles that they had to ride in too few days in the last book.
Yes,
it could seem like something where he just threw a number that stuck to the wall, and you get the feeling immediately that there's no way this could work. And as a reader, I think that can be kind of a bummer sometimes, to just be like, well, shit, what's the point? How are they possibly going to make this work? But I think having that little bit of successful foreshadowing first actually keeps the tension kind of alive in me, to be like, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe they won't just be wiped off the face of the planet,
Yeah, I agree. I also think like the juxtaposition of Katrina being gone this whole like time so far.
Yeah.
And that's like a real threat. Like it's a real thing that's happened.
Yes.
But also Roran is doing so well at like his fight is kind of the same thing for me.
Yeah.
Is like there is hope here. It does still seem.
It seems really bleak, dude.
It seems bleak.
Yeah.
But they definitely have Elva, and that's a good thing. I'm just wondering, is like Aragon going to be eating like granola this whole time? You know what I mean?
I mean, probably just chowing down on his granola, not knowing that we're going to imminent war.
Right.
I mean, it's definitely possible. I think that's what I mean. Like the stakes right now are almost too high.
Yeah. That's
where I think in a lot of ways that could kind of take the tension out of what's happening with Niswada in the war.
I see. I see what you're getting at. Yeah.
Versus like if there's a little bit of hope, if there's something like an Elva or literally just Elva herself,
or just like a Nasawada, like a competent leader.
I think for Niswada in the war, like she's obviously going to be there. Elva's going to be there, but like maybe there's going to be some other X factor, like when Elva jumped in when she wasn't anywhere near the room, like during this assassination attempt. What happened in that microcosm? I'm like wondering if something similar might happen on a larger scale when they go to war.
Yeah, I'm hoping so.
I'm hoping so too.
Or maybe another player like Dornag. Maybe he'll pop up and
Dormnad,
yeah.
please.
Dornag.
That's a dumb name, Dane.
That is a dumb name. What was I thinking?
How could you?
Christopher Paolini. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna think really, really deeply about that.
Well, I was just gonna say that's all I have for themes. If you're ready to think a little deeply,
yes,
and take us into our deep dive.
Well, I don't think too deeply this week. This is a lighter one because for today's deep dive, I just want to discuss a little bit Elva. She came up here. I think this is going to be a quick rundown of her powers, her place in the Varden. We know most of this, but I do want to review it all together as, you know, she's the little girl that Aragon blessed in that first book. So I just want to like start with that.
The cursed little baby who could, Dane.
Yes, seriously.
Isn't that a brave little cursed child?
Exactly. Brave little classic book for children.
Yeah, a series of children's books. Yeah. The Velveteen Cursed Baby.
I'm sure that exists somewhere. So he did try to bless her, little Aragon, but instead what really happened and what we learn in this book is he didn't conjugate a verb correctly, and instead because of that
happens all the time.
Yeah, poor conjugations lead to curses. Everyone knows that. That's what my English teacher told me. So his curse was, I'm just trying to read it because I don't think we've gone over it except for
like word for word.
Yeah. May luck and happiness follow you, and may you be a shield from misfortune. So really quickly, there's a fact here I love about this, and I want to share it here. I read this on Paolini.net. Christopher Paolini did not originally have Elva in his story or his outlines. The blessing in the first book was not intentionally written wrong by Paolini.
What?
Yeah, well, Paolini was cleaning up the ancient language and working on compiling a language guide for the deluxe edition of Aragon way back when. Yeah, he saw that he had made a mistake when Aragon was blessing Elva, and originally he was just going to change it in the reprintings.
What?
Yes, and that's how he came up with the idea. He was like, what if this happened? And that's how he made Elva.
Okay, so between first book and second book, he's like, oh, I'm going to codify this language that I've made up because fantasy people, yes, we all know, are into that.
Yes, exactly.
And he was like, oh shit, I did a boo-boo.
Yeah.
And it'd be interesting if I kept my boo-boo.
So here's my thing. We shouldn't be mad about Elva for Aragon when really it's Paolini's fault.
That's crazy.
We should be mad at Paolini.
I would not take that position. No, I'm going to continue ignoring that. I really am surprised. That's crazy.
It's crazy, right? I love that. So anyway, she's a shield to misfortune. So let's see how that changes the war and how he's going to change that. Because the fact that it's not originally in and now it's going to change the book so much blows my mind. Anyway, first, Elva seems to have two distinct abilities. One, she can feel the pain of those around her. This includes emotional pain. And this means she knows both the physical and pain someone is feeling, but the emotional feelings that are hurting them, which gives her insight in what would make them feel better. So she knows people really well.
Yes.
Right? Two, she can predict the pain that is going to happen in the near future, which means she is great at protecting people because essentially any harm that would come to somebody, she already knows before it's going to happen.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
She's like the less annoying version of that person who's like, I'm just really an empath. I just absorb the feelings of those around me. But for her, that's real.
She's a true empath.
Yes.
And it makes her a monster. So anyway.
So are people who say that all the time.
That's awesome. That's great. Exactly. This makes Elva very powerful, especially if she can somehow figure out how to cause harm to people.
Yes.
She can't because that would make her sick. But if she could figure that out, she'd be the best warrior in this entire book. She'd be scary.
Well, and here you can see like she is willing to take on some of that like sickness, some of her own physical pain and discomfort to ultimately serve the side she's chosen for whatever like tenuous reason she picked it.
Yeah, and I would say this actually has larger implications to the war too.
Yeah.
So like Galbatorix is he's gonna have a real hard time sneaking up on the army or assassinating anyone important, as we saw.
Yeah.
But we had to say like even like the captains, the kings, the king of Serta, Aragon, Auric, all of that she can protect.
Yeah.
Because she can just know
if
they're gonna be in trouble.
Yeah.
Basically anyone in the camp. So it's gonna also be hard to surprise in like ambushes in the future. Mm-hmm. They're kind of out of the question.
Yeah.
Against the main force.
Because so far it's not like it's been I think positioned as something that's like amorphous either. Like she knows concretely what's going to happen when and where.
It's wild.
It's not like a prophecy that is just like, something may befall you on the third full waning waxing moon of the
on the day of the moon.
What the hell?
When the trees ring clearly 5 times. Yes, exactly. It's not
like
that.
We meant moon like pulling down your pants, not moon like the celestial body. Haha.
And we weren't talking about the ringing of sounds. We were talking about physical rings.
Yes,
yeah,
it's just like
not
cool. She just knows exactly what's going to happen.
She knows what's going to happen.
She don't miss.
Also, Noah Swada is going to be like very powerful politically and interpersonally because she basically has the best therapist on the planet.
Yes, nothing makes you stronger like your good therapist.
Exactly. She just needs to work with Elva to like get really self-actualized. So watch out, everybody. But also, she can know what all of her political rivals fear.
Yeah.
What emotionally is bothering them, and this is going to make her like it's probably actually the most valuable part of the ability.
Yes.
And it's going to make the Varden a very well-oiled machine. I mean, even like generals and like squad leaders, Nasawada can pump everybody up perfectly. I mean, that's a real change. It'll be a real power.
Yes.
And finally, I just want to add that Elva reminds me a lot of the various myths and legends of changelings from Ireland, Scotland, Sweden, and Denmark.
Yeah, I kind of got that vibe too.
Yeah.
It's a little. It's
You're
a
the
lot
one
of
that
like
pointed me to this one.
a lot
this
of
week.
creepy baby stuff happening.
Yeah. I'm not going to go really deep into that, but basically, they're all basically centered around watching like your little baby, like a little infant, very closely so that trolls and fairies or even the mysterious underground people.
I love a myth about mole people.
Yeah. Don't change or switch out your baby, whatever that means.
It is. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's a lot of like, I think mythology, at least originally, geared towards getting you to protect your baby,
right.
which is good, serves a purpose. But the stuff that comes out of it is kind of creepy.
It's kind of wild.
Yeah.
So the common traits of changed babies, are you ready?
Yes.
Or replaced babies,
Womp.
is that they look old.
Sounds familiar.
They eat way, way, way too much.
Definitely familiar.
They know sometimes things they shouldn't.
Yes, that's Elva.
Or even they talk about things before a baby could or should even talk.
Yes, that's our little baby girl Elva.
It sounds like Elva, right?
It definitely does.
And the interesting thing is that often these myths are about babies who haven't been baptized, or as it was sometimes said in like the olden days, had the blessing of baptism.
Yeah.
So only when kids aren't blessed do they have this situation.
Interesting.
So it's like the opposite of what happened to Elva, which I also find really fascinating, especially because it's an accident.
Yes, I'm wondering like if that has any bearing on what's going to end up happening with Elva, that like there's so many obvious parallels to like the mythology behind changelings. And it's interesting to me. I mean, it's a lot of like Celtic and like Northern European kind of mythology, but there are a lot of consistencies, I think, in the changeling myths.
Yes.
So it's kind of a pervasive myth.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's all over Scandinavia.
Yes. And it's hard to imagine, that Christopher Paolini wasn't inspired by it to some degree, even just to like get Elva's like look and the creepy eating thing. I mean, some of it's got to be there, but then wondering to what degree like this subversion of the normal kind of changeling idea might factor into what's going to end up happening with Elva.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the accidental part of this because it makes what you're talking about. Like, I wonder if we should ask Paolini if this was an intentional.
Questions on questions, dude.
Yeah.
I like it.
Be interesting.
Changelings creep me out.
Changelings are a little weird.
Yeah.
And that's really what I got for my deep dive.
Yes, I like that. I mean, like you said, I'm into the changeling thing. So
You're into that.
I mean, it creeps me out, but like I'm glad that it kind of ties in.
Yeah, it's kind of nice.
Yeah.
And for what are the haters saying this week? We got nothing. There's nothing, haters. Go somewhere else.
Nothing about piracy. Come on. What are you
Yeah.
going to hate on with piracy?
What don't you like
Get
about
real.
What don't you like about threats and children who vomit because they can predict violence?
I think that's fair. There's like not, I think with our two newer characters, the
Yeah.
plotting is still so strong, maybe in a lot of ways, that there's just less to like, we had more time with Aragon to pick all the shit apart in his plot line. So maybe because he doesn't feature in this episode, people are like, well, Naswada and Roran still seem fine.
They're fine. It's all right.
I could see that. Well, if we have some time,
We do.
We have a little more Q&A that we've been doing if you've been
Ooh.
having fun with that. Listener Lexi, she asked questions a couple episodes back. Lexi
Okay.
from Washington. Hello,
Hi, Lexi.
Shout out. She asked, how can I get my significant other to read a fantasy series with me? And I liked that question. And I know you're practiced at this. I selected this for you.
Oh, did you?
I guess I've lobbed an easy one for you, Dane. Now knock it out of the park.
One I would be is go on YouTube, try to find like lore for any magic like world.
Like spoiler-free lore,
like spoiler-free
right?
lore. If I would say this, if they're like, I don't want to learn anything about the book, be like, hey, it'll be easier if you know a little bit about how the world functions. It's not going to ruin the plot. Just know how the world functions.
Something like the underlying religion. I think there's a really good video that we watched as a primer before we started Wheel of Time in book club that kind of explains
Yeah, I found all that stuff for you guys because I was
Yes,
like, it'll
like
help you
the
guys.
foundational mythology, but does nothing to ruin the story. But
No.
it's like, okay, I understand the connection point all these people have about like the wheel weaves as the wheel will.
Exactly.
You know?
It's helpful.
Yes, for
So
sure.
That would be the first thing. Pick a smaller one. I would pick
Would
even
you
a standalone
go? I
one.
was just about to ask.
Yeah.
Would you go standalone first?
I might go standalone first. That's how I got my wife into it.
Okay.
I did a standalone before we did Stormlight.
Okay.
And then my third suggestion would be one you've already read.
I was about to ask that too.
Yeah.
Damn.
Have it read.
We spent too much time together, but I was
Yes.
just going to say, so you would recommend doing something you haven't read versus like getting into something new together.
Do that next.
Okay.
So this way you want to be kind of a guide.
Okay.
And then like don't read faster than them. I have a real habit of like,
Wow, what a rich thing for
Yeah,
you
I
to
know.
suggest.
it's one of the things I struggle with. But like, keep up with it. Make it a thing you guys share together. Because one of the things that I love now is that like, we'll talk at night instead of watching TV or something. We'll read together and then talk about it. And like throughout the day, she'll be like, I can't believe what Adolin did. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I know, it's wild. And we'll talk about it. So, if you're too far ahead, that becomes difficult to do.
Yeah. And then I think for me, I might add maybe to start or pick something that's like more fantasy adjacent than like full immersion. Maybe something that's a little more crossover.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
The 10,000 Doors of January.
Yes.
Very approachable, set in the real world, very like fantasy light,
Yeah.
but definitely fantastical. By the middle of the book, you're like, oh wow, we're in other worlds. This is crazy.
Yeah.
But like the beginning is set in very like, you'll be like, oh, this is approachable
It's
and
like
nice.
grounded.
Yeah, main character's a girl. Like I feel like there's a family aspect in it. Everyone can. I think it'd be enjoyable. I really highly recommend that book. Anyway,
Just generally, yeah.
Yeah.
I did just recently get my boyfriend who doesn't do a ton of like fiction reading in general, but he does enjoy fantasy elements. He plays D&D on his own, and like I don't know, just for whatever reason, the reading of it is not his vibe.
Yeah.
But what he did just get very into and read like speed ran through was The Stand, which has a little bit of that like fantastical element to it.
Very good.
It's just generally a very good book, but I
Yes.
think like having something that's fantasy adjacent like that, and then figuring out where the ties are, where the hooks are for them, so that you can like maybe build the fantastical elements more and more into their like reading diet.
Yes, like
based on
slowly-
what they already like. So I'm like, okay, well, if you're kind of into horror apocalypse, like where to next, you know?
Yes.
And I can start recommending stuff for him based on that we can kind of read together.
That's a great recommendation. Yeah, either one of those books would be good starts.
Yes.
Like and honestly, with both of them, you don't need to have the lore books or like YouTube videos or anything. Those you can come in,
just jump right
just
in.
jump right in. There's not a hard thing, both of those worlds. And also, what I would say is try to have fun with it. I think a lot of people, I see this even with you and me sometimes, or even just with our book club or me and some of my other friends that read fantasy. There seems to be this idea that like the more you consume, the faster you consume, the more you're like better at reading or something.
Yeah, fuck that.
And I think like,
Absolutely fuck that.
yeah, I used to
You heard it here first.
Yeah. And I used to get in on that. You know what I mean? If I
Yeah.
hadn't read 100 books in a year or 200 books, you know,
ick.
it would be this whole thing. I think enjoy the reading slowly, talk
Yeah.
about it often, and just sit in it. Like, I think that's the joy of reading. At least for me, I used to be a completionist. I used to be like, let's just pound as many as we can.
Yeah.
But, you know, as I'm getting older, I'm like, it's about the journey.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of an elf.
And something, especially with a partner, even a friend, if this is more the vibe you're going for
Yeah.
getting someone into fantasy. I think having it be something you do that you can kind of eventize with another person is a huge tie-in too.
Yes.
So like my boyfriend and I will listen to an audiobook while we make dinner or
Yeah.
like have some specific ties in our daily routine that makes sense for that. With a friend, you could be like, oh, let's go on a walk and like sync headphones and
Yeah.
listen to, you know.
We even like we'll cuddle and read like
Yeah.
on the couch by the fire. You know what I mean? Just make it like
Make it more picturesque, Dane.
Yeah.
No, but I do think that's a big part of the tie. It's like, okay, we'll like make a little cocktail and like
Yeah.
sit down and listen to our book. We do the same thing with some podcasts that we listen to too.
Yeah,
like,
it's fun.
yeah. So I think that can be a good.
One more suggestion just popping in my head.
Yeah.
If I might even try to do stuff that has movies. I've never done this, but my suggestion would probably be like, I don't know. There's all those like Shadow and Bone books
Yes,
that
yeah,
have
yeah.
a show.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I think even like
Both very good books
yes,
and show.
Yes. So I would do that, or you have, I mean, Wheel of Time. I wouldn't get anything big like that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it has a show.
I think
but
that'd be tough.
and Silmarillion. I don't know if Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you jump there first either. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't, but
Yeah.
some people might.
Yeah, I know the Witcher books are good, but that show is bad. It's the opposite problem. Oh my god, we're gonna get so much hate mail. But yeah, those are my suggestions.
Okay. That's all I have for questions for this episode.
Cool.
Replace a little time.
This was fun this week, man.
Yes. How are you feeling about this episode section?
I feel like it's fun. There's pirates. There's a heist.
What's not to love, dude?
There's a weird cursed baby saving people. I love that.
Yeah.
Hard stance.
I will still remain firm. I do hate the chapter of that time. I don't know, just like the Chucky doll vibes of the chapter titled Child's Play. I just hate it.
It's kind of funny. Because I imagine he for whatever reason, Christopher Plummer's on a typewriter and he's like
He's 20
yeah.
on a typewriter.
Yes, smoking a cigarette. Like
God.
France is in the background and through a window. I don't know. And then he's like writes it and he goes, eh. Like, just like laughs.
Oh my God.
Anyway, on that note, thank you for listening to us. You're a trooper. Make sure to rate and review, especially on Apple Podcasts, support on Patreon, and check out our social media at Is This Just Fantasy Pod on TikTok or at Just Fantasy Pod on Instagram and Twitter. If you have any questions or just want to write to us about the podcast, we would love to hear from you. And you can email us at isthisjustfantasypod@gmail.com.
Yes, and if you want to keep pace and read along with us, on the next episode, we're going to cover Chapter 57, Red Blade, White Blade, through Chapter 61, Running the Boar's Eye. We're up in the 60s, Dane.
I know, we're almost done.
Did it. We are. We're actually like, what, 3 episodes?
No, we're so far forward.
And we love our fantasy. Come on and listen to us next time. Find out what our deep dive will be. Thanks for catching our show.